I find it amusing that when I search for like a new Star Wars or Marvel thing, oftentimes now first result is Ben Shapiro's
take
response
on the Barbie
to it.
movie, like hour and a half, and then critical
and then I look at it
and
and I'm like,
and
I'm like, you didn't even really talk about the trailer. You took an article from Pink News where the whole focus of that LGBT website was to say, here's all the people involved on this show that are LGBT, and it's like 6 people out of hundreds that are working on it. He reads that article and then uses that and presents this to his audience, and the implication is like, this is going to be the gayest show ever, and they're trying to turn your kids gay and trans.
Why did this character have to be gay? Feels like in the past there have been movies that have women leads who do a really good job at that, but it felt like it wasn't the explicit goal of the director or the artists to make that like a political statement. They just happened to be there. So like Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in Alien, or Kill Bill, and like these are like good examples of lead females who are just in awesome movies doing awesome things. And then you've got other movies where it feels a little bit more intentional. So whatever the woman is that the Quartering hates in Captain Marvel, he's made like 50 million, 50 million videos about her. Or the like Star Wars, the new trilogy or whatever with that female lead, where it feels like a little bit more of a political statement.
Yeah.
So you've got movies that feel like they're trying to make stronger political statements in our current culture. And then you've got now this kind of like YouTube movie reviewer culture that's very politically oriented. Yeah. Where there are certain movies that I watch and I could tell just because there's like a gay character or just because there's a type of character, I know there's someone on YouTube that's gonna be really mad about it. Yeah. What do you think about that environment in general?
It's a funny new environment that we're in, and I find it kind of amusing that like a lot of the people that scream the loudest about not wanting politics in their films are the ones injecting, like making them explicitly political with how they're engaging with it, especially with the amount of these channels that make 10 videos in a row about a movie that's not even out yet, but just like the person who directed like a lesbian woman, and she said that she liked Frozen because there wasn't like a male love story. It's like, wait, that's not blah, 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 right? And then you search for like a trailer of like one of these new, it's always like Star Wars and Marvel, and it seems like most of the films that they experience and their entire language of how they view film is only through the lens of Star Wars and Marvel, which is also another frustrating thing, because maybe not all of them, but definitely some of them, they have this sort of mantra of like, oh, movies are bad now, when in reality also there's a bit of like, a perception bias because films from the past, if you look on Wikipedia and you just look at the entire list of movies released within the year, like notable movies released within the year, go to like 1996, right? You'll find a bunch of shit that was just trash, forgotten, cynical, lazily made, no personality, no soul. But we remember the ones that are special. And just like the films in this generation, we remember the ones that are special. We remember the films that connect with people in ways that break the norms, or ways that might even be reinforcing some norms, but do something that people really, really jive with. So in the sense of, I guess, these characters kind of existing, I find it amusing that when I search for like a new Star Wars or Marvel thing, oftentimes now first result is Ben Shapiro's
take
response
on the Barbie
to it.
movie, like hour and a half, and then critical
and then I look at it
and
and
the Quartering,
and I'm like, you didn't even really talk about the trailer. You took an article from Pink News where the whole focus of that LGBT website was to say, here's all the people involved on this show that are LGBT, and it's like 6 people out of hundreds that are working on it. He reads that article and then uses that and presents this to his audience, and the implication is like, this is going to be the gayest show ever, and they're trying to turn your kids gay and trans, right? He's reading an article, and it would seem like if you just saw his content and the same people in his sort of ecosystem commenting on these things, you'd get an entirely different impression about exactly what is happening in the industry, or exactly or how big of an issue these things are, when it's like, okay, well, one Star Wars show out of how many are there? 8,000 or whatever. It's like, okay, you have a lesbian woman directing it. There's a trans person in it. There's a non-binary person in it. They maybe get like 10 seconds of screen time. We have no idea. Maybe one of them's a main character. Is that really like a thing to be making like 10 videos about before it's out, and acting and really drumming up your audience and getting everybody kind of in this weird sort of like, they're after you and they're after your kids sort of mentality? I think that's a little historically harmful, maybe not a great sort of vibe for people to be in, especially when there's a lot of like crazy impressionable people that these people kind of know are probably in their audience too. I don't think it's doing a lot of good, but everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And there's a lot of these films that wind up sucking anyway. You wouldn't catch me being like, oh, whatever what most of these shows that they take issue with are just shit shows anyway and shit movies. But not because there's a trans person in it, and not because there's a woman in it. It's because they're creatively bankrupt in the exact same ideas I was talking about earlier, where they have no faith in artists and they have faith in IPs. That's exactly what they're doing. That's why all of these shows that they're doing this with are Marvel and Star Wars, is because historically they can look at certain demographics. They can look at the fact that there is an appetite to want to see more women in movies. There is an appetite for a certain portion of the crowd to want to see more people of color in movies. There's some appetite that exists to want to see representation of trans people or non-binary. That's not happening to every show. It's happening to a small fraction of shows, some of those being pre-existing IPs of big names that, like, I guess a lot of people are very emotionally attached to in a nostalgic way. But the Barbie movie was the highest grossing film of last year. It beat the Mario movie. That was like the most feminist woke shit ever. And so obviously there's an appetite for it. But what the Barbie movie did well is they trusted in actual artists like Noah Baumbach, like Greta Gerwig, right? These two that created this film from their own ideas and were allowed to essentially do what they wanted with, I'm sure, some notes, but not necessarily just trying to recreate the success of like, let's do Star Wars, but it's a woman, or let's do Marvel, but it's a girl power movie. It's the creative bankruptcy that is causing these issues, not the fact that there's any sort of representation.
I think that's what drives me the craziest when it comes to like the very political analyses of anything. It can be it can even be of political things when people have their particular lens they look through. But yeah, like if you make a Ghostbusters movie with an all-male cast and the movie kind of isn't that great, like Ghostbusters 2, like nobody would ever say, well, they f***ed up because it was an all-male cast. But then if you make like the all-female Ghostbusters and you're like, well, this movie wasn't good, it's not because they didn't have good ideas or because it was, artistically bankrupt. It's because, well, it was because they picked women. And it's like, would men starring in that movie have made it any better? Like, is that really what we're running with? Is super frustrating.
I think I would like to see a world where people are more self-conscious of their own biases in a way where I don't think the average person realizes just how much more they'll notice something that is not something that they're already used to. Because that is essentially a lot of criticism, and a lot of conservative criticism, is that something is kind of challenging an existing norm or challenging an existing tradition. And so, is it as much of a political statement for there to be a gay kiss as a straight kiss? It depends on who you ask. If we had if society was entirely differently up until this point and we were in a different culture where there wasn't like a stigma directly associated with one over the other, then it would be perceived less politically. So I don't know. It's like, maybe it's just an issue of just trying to look at things like, there's no true objectivity, but attemptedly more objective, or try to look past your own biases, or try to maybe think like, am I upset about this because it's different? Or is it being political because it's different? Or is there something more deep-rooted? Is there like an actual reason towards why I should be feeling upset about this film? Is it about the artistry? Like, I think that's the most important factor, is the artistry. And that seems to often get ignored by a lot of these channels in this particular ecosystem that have made things way more political from their own content than the things that they criticize.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And then I wonder sometimes, like, maybe people are making political movies like this, if they are doing it spitefully or whatever, literally just because of your reaction to it.
Yeah, because it's free promotion now.
Yeah.
It's free promotion now.
And then even like some of the questions that are involved in this, like why did this character have to be gay? And it's like,
why they have to be straight? I don't know. Like,
why is anybody
gay? Depends on
it's just like
depends on the writer, and it depends on what they're trying to do. If you don't connect with that sort of thing, like, no one's forcing you to watch the film.
Yeah. Or
and there's it's not like there's a shortage of like
straight
heteronormative straight white characters in huge IPs. It's not like you can't find that, right? So
do you feel similarly for people that read cultural commentary, political themes and everything. I'm reminded of, I'm really bringing this question up about Dune 2. A lot of people read Dune 2 as like I say a lot of people, but there's really just one person from the Dune part who made a tweet about this. It's like a love letter to the Palestinians or whatever. I saw a lot of people trying to take like Star Wars and be like, you guys really think that, the rebels, that would represent America? Like this is blah, blah, blah. Do you feel like movies and the way people view them now is more political than I guess you felt like movies were like 20 or 30 years ago? Or
I mean,
do you think it's always been like about that?
Well, here's the thing is anything you view on fucking Twitter is going to be that way, right? I think it's the lens and the format that we view conversations through entirely. Like in that sense, it's not just films. It's literally everything has been hyper politicized. So I don't think that's a statement necessarily about the film industry or necessarily even film viewers. I think that's more a statement about Twitter and just internet brain people. And sure, there is room for some commentary about how you relate to a film politically, even if Dune is a story that was made, I don't remember what year the original book came out. It was pre-80s anyway, or maybe in the 80s. But, even if you're attaching that onto current day political events, there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess I would be careful before like attributing intent to the artists in that way. I guess if you're just trying to be accurate. But there's no harm in like I guess having that connection with it. If that's the type of way you want to think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel when people bring up names like Nolan and Tarantino? Do you think it's good that these particular directors have like so much name recognition? Like everybody wants to see the next Nolan or Tarantino movie. Do you think it's become like a bit gimmicky or? It's
kind of interesting because I think just to some extent, there has to be a level of mass public appeal to their films, but also a level of consistency. Because there's directors that have made hit after hit after hit, but you watch their films and it doesn't really feel like they have a voice. Like you wouldn't be able to just watch it and be like, oh yeah, this is one of, I'm blanking on a name, but there's plenty of examples. Just director for hire type films. Whereas Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, and even smaller directors like Wes Anderson, they're kind of becoming household names just because they're consistent in their style. And people go, oh, I want to see more of this type of thing that I like. And I think that they're offering, even if their films are different, they're offering things that at least connect with the people that enjoyed their previous works. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would say there's a lot of better artists out there and a lot of smaller artists. And if the people that need more help, I would like to see get more attention. Christopher Nolan can fund any movie he wants to. He's not going to get studio notes. He can just ask for a huge chunk of hundreds of millions of dollars and then just say, I want to make a thing. And he gets to make a thing. And meanwhile, Charlie Kaufman is struggling to get some low budget projects funded. And it's upsetting. So I would like to just help out the smaller creators, the talented smaller creators anyway.
Do you know how much these movies cost to make? Any idea?
Christopher Nolan's?
No.
Oh, Charlie Kaufman?
Because I'm pretty sure those are hundreds of millions. Yeah, Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, I think Synecdoche might have been like 10 million.
Okay.
I think I'm thinking of Ending Things, which came after that, might have been less. That might have been just a few million. Like I would say around the 10 million range for like a really one of his like more ambitious films. And then I don't know what his highest budget film would be, but there's definitely not in the hundreds of millions for sure.
Do you think there's a value in, I've heard people argue for mid-budget films, that this idea between like this like $1 to $15 million price range is enough to experiment and do a lot of cool stuff without a studio having to stake out like a $250 million risk on somebody?
Yeah, because then the notes that studios give to artists is oftentimes a result of them just being like, we need to make a return on investment. You need to follow the checklist. This is the proven checklist. For a while, it was just do this, put the name Marvel or Star Wars on it. And then the past year of Disney is like, oh, they can't really rely on that anymore. It looks like they're spending way too much money, putting content out way too frequently, and there's no voice to it. There's no real artistry to it. There's not enough different voices or different talented people that are being allowed to do creative things, and so that's kind of harming them. But is the last year of Disney been rough for them? I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've had a lot of flops in a row. So I don't know if they've made up for it in terms of like streaming service subscribers, but part of their business model, and also the fact that people are subscribed to this thing and they're expecting the movie to come out later than anyway, might have impacted their theatrical sales. They've had a lot of theatrical flops in the past year.
I don't know if I'm hallucinating this or if I just don't pay attention to stuff closely. Or maybe it's always been like this. I feel like when things would come out in theaters, you'd have like this half-year delay before it would hit digital. I feel like it's happening in a matter of weeks now. Am I making that up, or
it depends on the movie?
Okay,
depends on the movie. The only ones that we'll see. That's not incorrect.
I don't know if it's Dune 2 or something. There are some movies where I feel like I just saw this in theaters and it's like on YouTube, like for purchase. And I'm like, Jesus, that's like wild to me.
I mean, I think that they probably try to gauge it based on whichever movie it is. And if they feel like they can kind of ride the momentum of, you know, everybody, when they see a movie now, is just posting about it on social media, right? So even successful movies that aren't necessarily like, oh, we got to take it out of theaters because it's tanking, will wind up being available just on iTunes, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, etc. Just because that's how the industry is shifting, and because that's making up a more significant portion of the revenue that films are generating.
Do you feel strongly about the movie experience, like going to a theater, or do you not care? Do you think people watch it on cell phones or on monitors in their computer rooms?
Yeah, I don't. If whatever way someone wants to watch a movie, I'm not going to take like a huge issue with. I'm not like a purist, like, oh, you can't watch it on your phone. Like, I don't know. These movies were available on VHS, and that wasn't phones look a lot better than VHS, especially if you're listening with good headphones at this point. So if we weren't willing to say that VHS was not an acceptable way to watch a movie, and that was not a pure experience, like, I don't know. But it's, some people want to experience art in different ways. If the way you want to experience art is in a social setting and you're like chatting with your friends a bit throughout the movie, that's a perfectly valid way to experience a movie. But I would argue that, you know, certain films, you know, like that are commanding a bit more of your attention, that you kind of need to be paying more attention to, you might get less out of those experiences, or you might just want to watch it a second time and try to pick up more about it. But I don't think that there's a necessarily wrong way to watch a movie, in my opinion.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like there is a value to the ritual itself is fun.
Yeah.
Stepping into the theater, buying popcorn, sitting down, the trailers, everybody's being quiet. I also feel like there's a value to the physical space that something occupies. I happen to have a nice, like, decently large TV and a decently large sound system, so watching that Synecdoche movie was fun, but I feel like it would be a lot to sit and watch that in theaters. I feel like would be there's like this, maybe this is like a little cringe or a little meta, but when you've watched like a really powerful movie, I think when the credits roll and like nobody gets up, nobody's standing, nobody's leaving, everybody's just kind of there, and you can all tell that you're like, oof, that was a lot. Yeah, there are definitely movies that I've really enjoyed watching in theaters, and that experience has been really special, that I feel like I wouldn't have gotten the same out of watching at home. But I mean, like, maybe that experience is just like a separate fun experience. It's not integral to the movie itself, and it's just like a separate thing. But
there's pros and cons for sure. It depends on the audiences, depends on the theater. I try to avoid, like, you generally, my experience has shown that if you're watching a movie and the theater is in a mall and it's a horror movie, probably the worst audiences, bunch of teenagers who were literally just hanging out at the mall, not because they wanted to see a movie, and are now in the movie because they wanted to kill time, and are now talking through the movie because they want to prove to their girlfriend that they're tough and they're not actually scared, right? So those are generally bad audiences. But film festivals like TIFF, my favorite film festival, Toronto Film Festival, generally, like, very, very respectful audiences and very engaged audiences as well. There's an energy to the crowd, and you can really tell that everybody's just there because they want to be, and they're loving what they're experiencing, which is always just a great environment and a great festival. Yeah. So there is a valuable experience to it, but I don't necessarily feel as though I often say that I wish that I could have seen a movie in theaters, unless it's a particular type of comedy that I would have loved to experience with a laughing crowd. Sometimes I've felt that way about it. And then other times I felt like, just purely for the sake of the film's distribution, like, why did this go to Hulu? It should have had a theatrical release, because I like the director and I wish that they would have gotten more success out of it and had a bit more longevity out of the release.
Yeah. I don't know if it was Scorsese or Fincher. I remember somebody gave like an angry rambling about watching a movie on your phone. That's
that was
not how
David Lynch.
Oh, was it Lynch?
Yeah,
okay,
he's done it a couple times. He's funny.
Okay.
But he's a purist in so many ways, that he's a fun, crazy old kook.
When you talk about purists, do you have a strong feeling? I think Tarantino does this a lot, between like digital versus like film.
I mean, it's whatever. There's a lot of films that exist that are still emulating older styles and shoot on digital for practical and budgetary reasons, and then we'll even do something like, shoot in color and then remove the color in post and have it black and white. The White Ribbon by Michelle Haneke. Like, if you know what to look for, you can tell it's digital, but it still doesn't, like, I don't feel like I'm not in the time period because it's a digital movie. I mean, like, to some extent, the idea of watching a film and having changing angles and all the technology associated with that, like, that's not real in the film's universe, at least, depending on the film. So there is, I've definitely seen a value in terms of shooting on film for stylistic purposes, and if there's directors that really want to, champion that, especially as a way of screening films, I'm glad to see that there are some directors that are really like trying to keep it alive. Because I don't know, once Quentin Tarantino is not really in the business anymore, I don't know how many more people you're going to be able to get to watch films in like a actual film projected screening. I guess Christopher Nolan did the like 70 millimeter IMAX of a few films, and maybe Denis Villeneuve could do it, but I mean, a lot of those films are still shot on digital.
Mm-hmm. So. And then just transferred to film for the shooting theater?
Yeah, depending on the film. I would have to look it up, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Roll the Dune clip.
Dune clip?
Roll clip.
Coming right up.
The definitive Dune clip.
All right, here we go, boys.
And it was good. I liked it. And a lot of the criticisms that I had with Dune Part 1 were very much improved for this film. I wound up re-watching Dune Part 1 in preparation for Dune Part 2, partially to see if my opinion would change on the first film, and partially because I just didn't remember that much of it.
Wait, what is the story behind this? Why don't you just like record your face for like a thing? Is it just like easier to fucking record?
Yeah, I mean, it gives it a different personality.
Okay.
There was a point in my life, how I said I was like kind of shy at a certain point. So like every photo I took was just this like dumb, like I'm going to make my face look ugly. So if I try not to be ugly, it won't even matter because I'm trying to be ugly. And then that face just sort of, it was the first one that I put in my videos, and then I just used it as the branding since. And, why fix what ain't broke sort of thing.
Okay, based.
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
I know that people seem to really unanimously love the first film, but it really was not for me, and this was reaffirmed on my second watch.
God. Oh my God, I got to relive yesterday. The dog shitness that is Dune. I was worried, I was like, okay.
I just saw Dune.
Hey, all of chat was mad.
That's fun.
Because you were right. Dune 1 was a horrible movie. It was bad. What is is there an opposite word of Kino? Whatever the opposite of that is.
Cringe.
Yes. It was so many criticisms of Dune, and the first word out of everybody's mouth, okay, but in the book, God, I hated that movie.
Yeah, that happens a lot. That happens a lot in the same way that happens with a lot of biopics. Sometimes people are kind of already going into a movie like attached to an idea or an IP or a person, which is funny because, a lot of times I don't connect with something. People go, you went into it wanting to hate it. So, well, okay, well, if that's a thing, then would you not say that you went into it wanting to like it, that might be a bias or something? Yeah, it's like Oppenheimer, I don't think it's a bad film. I just think that there's a better movie that would appeal to me if it were edited down and some things were changed. There's pieces to a great movie within it, but overall, I mean, I love a lot of Denis Villeneuve's films, but this one just did not. I was willing to watch it for a second time, but it just bounced off my brain again. It doesn't speak to me on a personal level like a lot of my favorite movies do.
Okay, you haven't seen Game of Thrones at all, right?
I saw the first 3 episodes, and then I said to myself, I don't care about anything that's going on. And so I didn't watch the rest of it. And then over time, when people started saying that it went to shit, I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't go anywhere with it.
Wait, you didn't care about anything that was going on? What do you mean by that?
I didn't care about the characters or their dynamics.
Oh my God.
I feel like 3 hour-long episodes is a pretty good chance to give something.
It is, and you should have liked them by then.
Okay, but I'm glad I didn't, because you're probably very disappointed with the show, right? And how it turned out.
Not the first 4 seasons.
Yeah, but then what? It's not an ending.
That's season 2. That's
right?
the second arc. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
I don't think about the last half.
Okay, yeah, but when someone tries to sell me on the idea of watching a long show or any kind of series where there's a cohesive narrative from the beginning to the end, to me, that is basically the equivalent of recommending a movie where it's like, oh, the first half of this movie is fucking amazing, but the second half is just the most dog shit thing to ever exist. And then, you know, like, I don't know. Maybe especially...
Maybe there's a beauty to that. Maybe. The end is in the beginning. And sometimes you buy a house, it's on fire, knowing that, it's better to choose your horrible ending than to...
Well, I think I made the right choice then.
It's actually so interesting to say that, because I was going to I was using that as a point of comparison. I like all the characters in Game of Thrones. You didn't, which is interesting.
I mean, from what I experienced out of the first 3 episodes, it just didn't speak to me. So.
Something that I was going to say that was a problem with Dune, but now maybe you'll have a complete, total different feeling from Dune. Maybe I can use, you've seen, I imagine, Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
Do you like the characters from Lord of the Rings?
I love the characters in Lord of the Rings.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That kind of works as a point of comparison then.
Yeah.
For Dune, and I felt this even during Dune 2, I don't know what it is, or what if it's, I don't know if it's the performances, or if it's the writing, or if it's the directing. But there's a style of like formal line epic delivery that makes me feel totally emotionally disconnected from the characters.
Because it seems kind of like insistent.
So stiff and insistent. Where like if I'm watching Lord of the Rings, I could imagine a tearful moment if almost any of those main characters died. When I was watching Dune 2, like even during the romance scenes between like Zendaya's character and Tim Cham, his character, even in the romance scenes, I was like, this is like the stiffest. Like I feel like I'm at like a high school line reading auditioning for a play. I just don't have any emotional connection. Do you think that, did you feel similar, or do you think that I like have my own feeling there, or what? Like
I feel as though Tim Cham, from what I understand of fans of the book, they say, oh, he looks exactly how the character is supposed to look.
Okay.
I don't think that his performance was one that really sold me on like any intrigue about the character, or perhaps if I had read the source material beforehand and I already kind of knew where things were going. Because like I said earlier with some other films, like sometimes having an idea of what something is before going into it, like a movie on a second watch, it can be a better experience when you're like, oh, I know how it's paced and I kind of know what to expect. And then you're not kind of like disappointed by having different expectations. In that sense, I think that maybe, you know, if I was more familiar with the source material and I had like a better understanding of like the dynamics and the goals and, you know, the characters, then maybe I would have appreciated it more. But even on a second watch for Dune Part 1, as someone who still hasn't read the books, I felt very disconnected, and I felt like Tim Cham's performance got a lot better and his character got a lot better in the second film, and his goals were more clear and the dynamics were more interesting.
It's just strange to me that like it's essentially, my guess is, I've never read the book, but the movies make it feel like Dune is probably like a young adult book. It's like a coming of age type of thing, like a boy becoming a man and all of the trials and tribulations of like taking on more responsibility and shedding your adolescence and childhood, and you know, like, right, to have a character who's like the stand-in for that I just like, I don't know if there needed to be moments of like self-doubt, or him like, it's like, even if he were to doubt himself, like a moment like that, I feel like it would be conveyed with him like standing in front of a mirror being like, my future, I know not what I must do. It would just be like the stiffest, most like, Jesus Christ. Like, I don't feel like you're a fucking human at any point of this. I feel like his mom wasn't a human. Them talking to each other wasn't human. The only guy that I felt like was somewhat human through that was actually, it was the older guy that like had like the Morpheus character that had faith in him the whole time. Whatever that character was. I felt like he was like decently, I liked him as like a person, as a character and human being.
You know,
everybody else I felt so stiff.
You know what I feel gives the characters more humanity in Lord of the Rings? Is that the overall film doesn't take itself nearly as seriously.
Sure.
And Dune is the type of film where it's going for a very serious tone, despite, honestly, like a lot of things that kind of happen within it being a little goofy. And perhaps maybe just for me personally, like I would have benefited from a movie that wasn't trying to sell me this like super serious tone. In the second film, I think it pulled it off really well. There's very few films that I would actually say like, this scene is epic. I think that word should be reserved for things that are actually like, holy shit, like insanely constructed, where like all the emotions are hitting, and like the, you know, well, they're dodging the rocket, or they're shooting the rockets at the helicopter and going behind the cover. Like that was
scene. That was really cool.
Scene.
Definitely agree.
I would never say the word epic.
Yeah. But I also kind of liked, I liked the ending fight. I thought that was cute. Although I think it's weird that they introduced like a super big bad villain, like one half into the movie and then had his like full arc completed. The guy who had no hair anywhere. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Austin Butler.
Yeah.
Or
Austin?
I mean, there were a few.
That's what they called him. No, I'm just kidding.
There were a few characters that had no hair, but
yeah,
the one with the black and white fight.
It was the big fight at the end.
I mean, yeah, I think that was the same character.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't feel as though Christopher Walken was fitting in the movie. He was kind of distracting. That was just kind of like a weird casting choice.
Yeah, when I saw it, because that guy is Christopher Walken.
I know.
He very much is everywhere. I don't know if he can shed that. He's like the opposite.
They tried a little.
Did they? Man, wow.
Yeah, they tried to hide parts of his accent, but it still kind of bled through.
Wait, you guys know why they chose him, right?
No. Oh, there's a reason. Oh boy.
There's a reason. There's a
God!
reason.
Don't play this stupid thing.
You know what this is.
More
you know
cowbell or something.
Yeah. No. In the song, one of the lyrics is, "If you walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm." And it's Christopher Walken dancing. This is why they did it.
He's Sandwalking.
It's all for the meme.
Christopher Sandwalking. That might be why, but also, you look at the business of filmmaking. You have to put a lot of recognizable stars in the film just to get it greenlit and just to get your movie made a lot of the time. So, now maybe depending on who Denis works with in terms of studios and distributors, like maybe at this point now he'll have as much power as someone like Christopher Nolan. I think he's getting close to that point. I think that there are people that do care about him as a director enough that whatever movie he makes next, people are going to watch. He put his name in the trailer.
He was the same one that did Blade Runner, right? 2049?
2049,
yep.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's doing very well for himself. And I'm very happy about that because I've loved his work for a while. He had a film called Incendie in 2009? I don't remember what year. 2008? But that was incredible. That was one of his earlier-ish ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.